What's up, y'all? You know, there's never been a funeral that I've ever been to that wasn't sad. Doesn't matter how old the person ever was. It could be an infant, a young person, a middle-aged person, or an elderly person. It doesn't matter. But when infants die, there is the thought that, well, at least this infant doesn't have to grow up in a sin-sick world, and the child is definitely in a better place. What makes us believe that this child is in a better place? Well, the fact that the child has not had to deal with sin and not had to deal with the darkness, right? So one would assume that when children die, they go right to the bosom of the Father. And this is a thought that is common amongst human beings, especially believing human beings. The child's in a better place. It's not a joyful occasion by any stretch, because you feel bad for the parents that are involved in that situation. What if I showed y'all that in Islam, even for babies, it's not guaranteed that they go to heaven to be with the Creator? Let's take a look at it. This is Sahih Muslim, a hadith. This is what Aisha says. She says, Allah's messenger, there is happiness for this child who is a bird from the birds of paradise, for it committed no sin, nor has he reached the age when one can commit sin. He said, Aisha, peradventure, or perhaps it may be otherwise, because God created for paradise those who are fit for it while they were yet in their father's loins, and created for hell those who are to go to hell. He created them for hell while they were yet in their father's loins. So as you can see, Muhammad's attitude was that God created hell for people, regardless of innocence or non-innocence. You could be a baby and go to hell, according to Muhammad, their great prophet. But when you read the Bible in Deuteronomy, specifically the first chapter, it talks about how Israel was very rebellious. It talks about how they wanted to make it to the promised land, but God was like, I think around the 39th verse, he says something along the lines of, well, your children gonna make it. Y'all afraid that they will be captured, but they gonna make it. Why? Because they were innocent. It was the wicked, rebellious grown-ups who weren't gonna make it.
That makes sense.
Luke 18, it talks about how some parents brought their children to see Jesus. And the disciples tried to stop these kids from seeing Jesus. But Jesus is like, no, let them through, for the kingdom of heaven belong to those like these. So we see how Muhammad is diametrically opposed to what Jesus teaches in the New Testament, as well as what Deuteronomy said about those innocent children who would make it to enter the promised land. According to Muhammad, paradise, heaven, the promised land, all of that, none of that is guaranteed for children. But I'll see y'all on the next one.